Go. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in again. I am honored to be with the candidate for Commissioner District 1, Marie Shimada. Marie, how are you doing today?
I am good. Fall is my favorite season, so I am loving that it's finally October and the leaves are changing. And I've been looking forward to this experience ever since Wednesday when we had to postpone. So it's good to
Yeah.
be with you.
Yeah, no, sorry about that. That was entirely my fault. She was ready to go. Everything was set up, and then my headphones were not computing with my computer, so I couldn't hear anything. And we fixed it. So I am happy to be doing this now. And thank you so much for coming back for seconds after the complete cluster of the first one.
Of course.
Um, but I wanted to jump right into some of the questions about your campaign. The first one being, what made you decide now is the time to run for commissioner?
Yeah. I didn't. I didn't start out thinking that. I started out thinking I can't wait for someone else to run so that I can run their campaign. Because I have a past experience in helping manage campaigns. I've worked at the local level as well as state campaigns and enjoy the people I've gotten to work with and was excited maybe to do that again for somebody at the local level. And there were kind of a series of meetings and interactions, particularly with Island County Democrat leadership around the future and possibilities for the future, and who would be really good candidates to run for District One. And kind of one by one, those people were being asked and saying no because they had something that they were working on right now that maybe they would run in the future. And simultaneously, I was feeling like I'm involved in nonprofits, I'm involved in local government, and I've been involved with other local elected officials. And there's things I'm seeing that maybe aren't reflecting what I think this community is about, and who's gonna stand up and take this on. And as more and more people were saying no, I was starting to feel like, okay, well, if I believe the things I say, and if I'm going to walk the walk, like I have to be the change that I want to see in the world too. And so maybe this is something that I will do and that I will take on and I will step forward. And
Well,
that's kind of how those things coalesce to me going from I love campaigning for other people to I'm going to do a campaign now.
yeah, no, I have had a similar experience when I made a run for treasurer. It didn't go well. Don't use that as a don't use that as a means of campaigning. But yeah, no. One thing that you hit the nail on the head on both parties. The best candidates, the people that could do the most good, often don't run. They just don't run. They've got other stuff going on in their life. They're busy for any number of reasons, whether it be at their job or be at work. And these are people that could fix it. And I'm glad that you at least stepped up and decided to take the plunge because I can tell you, and I'm sure you can confirm, running for yourself is a totally different animal. It is so much easier to campaign for somebody else and support them than be on the firing line. At least that was my experience.
Yes, yes, especially I'm sure for you too, when there are families involved and
Uh-huh.
partners and relationships and, parents and extended family who are all affected, by
Yes.
things that happen. Yeah.
So I wanted to jump in. Speaking of your campaign, a lot to like. It has been phenomenal with fundraising, and that's just independent, outside looking in. You have raised about $80,000 in your campaign. Just for a contrast, I was super proud of my campaign raising $11,000 for local treasurer. It's a different race, but I
Mhm.
broke the record for treasurer, and I was super excited about that. And that was hard work. You've done 8 times that work in a short amount of time. You almost have broken the local record. The local record right now is held by Janet St. Clair at 98,000 for local commissioner. So I guess this is a two-parter. One, do you think you're going to break the record? And two, how is it that your campaign has garnered so much traction and resonated with voters? Because if you're bringing in money, you're
Mhm.
resonating with people. So how did it happen?
Yeah, well, first of all, I hope I break the record, but not because I want to be a record breaker. I hope I
Be a
can
record
raise
breaker.
6 yeah, right, like, I hope I can raise 6 figures because that's what it's actually going to cost to be able to reach voters, and that's the reality of campaigns is that there is a lot of money that goes into it, but it's because voter outreach is such a big it's a huge task and it's a huge
Mhm.
lift and there are so many different forms whether it's digital media or whether it's direct mail or whether it's the ability to hold events and really bring people into the same space all of that costs money and certainly time so it's my hope while as exciting as it is that we've raised as much as we have so far and I'm so thankful for every dollar in my mind, I'm like, no, I still have 20,000 left that I have to do in a very, very short amount of time. I've got about 2 weeks that I'm trying to hit that
Yeah.
goal in right now. So
And
I feel like the pressure's on, even though we have come so far, and I'm so proud. As far as I think what has resonated with people since the very beginning, since we launched, I think, on the premise that you're allowed to campaign differently and you're allowed to do politics differently. And maybe local government can really be a force for good. And it can be a place where we can think differently about how to accomplish common goals for the entire community. And I think that's what's resonating with people. And we've got people from all different industries, all different sectors, and all different categories of life that have joined in on the Team Marie effort and who've given it at all different levels. We appreciate the $5 as much as we appreciate the $1,000. And I think people feeling like they're heard, they're seen, and they get to be a part of something that's exciting, that is sort of like teeing us up for what that exciting future gets to be. And
yeah.
I also think my team and I, we've been actively campaigning this entire time. And by that, I mean, like, we're going out and we're knocking on doors, we're meeting voters where they are at in their homes. We're also doing events. My calendar feels sometimes like nonstop events where we're
Yeah.
either getting ready for an event or we're planning the next event. And as you know, right now it's a countywide race. So I've got events that I'm doing on Camino and in Oak Harbor and still in District 1 as well to continue to reach people in this district too. So I think we're out there, we're visible, and I think that there's a direct correlation kind of between effort and interest. And my interest is serving this community. My effort has been in getting to know this community. I think people are seeing that and appreciating that, and that's why they're investing in that.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's no question that they are. And I will say, I've also seen you in Camino, I think 3 times already, which is very good for because I know you live in South Woodby, so it is a
Yeah.
nightmare of a trip for you to come down here. I know this because going to South Woodby is hard. It's a beautiful drive, but
I'm
it's a
there
day.
every week. I'm there every week. I even was there the day, that it Oak Harbor parts of Oak Harbor went underwater, it was flooding. I remember leaving Camino and then driving as fast as I could home so that I didn't get stuck in the roads that were going underwater. So it's been a big experience every week going to Camino, but every time I'm there, I love it so much.
Well, that is something that Camino voters will appreciate, I'm sure, because one major thing, whether it's fair or not, local government in Camino is mostly seen to be centered around and focused entirely on Whidbey. And there's a couple of reasons for that. That makes sense. One, Whidbey has a bigger population, almost double, I think. Two of the 3 districts are in Whidbey. And actually a piece of the third is in Whidbey too. So two and a half. But the people on Camino, we don't have a local government. We don't have a mayor. We don't have a city council. So our
Right.
entire fate is based off the commissioners. So it's very important to them that they see their candidates. So thank you for doing that, and I hope other candidates will do that as well. So if you take office, you get elected, and you take office, what are going to be the top priorities for you to fix, change, keep
Yeah.
when you take
Yeah,
off?
I'm excited to sort of parse this one out with you because my answer has changed from the primary to the general, based on some really specific interactions that I have had with voters. And I think, as you know, because you're a political junkie and you've run for office yourself, oftentimes when we're trying to get endorsements from either labor unions or PACs, we fill out endorsement questionnaires.
Yep.
So there's a huge chunk of campaigning that feels like you're writing, essays over and over again. And every single one of those questionnaires asks the same question about what are going to be your top three priorities. And I think it got so easy to be like, I know what my top three things are that resonate with me and that really stuck out to me when I launched my campaign based on the feedback from everyone that we were talking to. And it was attracting and retaining county employees, it was working on the housing issues and climate issues. And I think what I started to realize over time was just by saying sort of these headlines or titles of issue topics, we really weren't that different from any other person campaigning for any office anywhere. And those things can mean different things to different people. I think there's every person who was in this race in the primary, like they agreed there was something about the environment that was a priority. But maybe when you actually got into what do we believe in our personal or political lives about the environment, those are drastically different definitions, but we were using the same words. Or, you can say you like politics and I can say I like politics, but you're known for being a Republican and I'm known for being a Democrat. So we might have very different definitions and it doesn't actually tell people anything just to say, I know there's a housing issue and that is a priority. And I ended up in a situation where on primary election day, someone had reached out to me and they wanted to meet. And it wasn't someone I knew, which is surprising because they are in my sort of social orbit and we have mutual friends and we're of a similar age. And I was, sort of caught off guard, like, oh, this person wants to meet with me rather urgently and it's on primary election day. I don't even know how the day is going to go, right? Who knew what that night was going to look like. And we met at her house and we sat and talked. And she said some things to me that really changed my entire perspective on what my overall goal and purpose for the campaign was, especially, now that I know that I am going into the general. And she really talked to me about, there's a whole group of us that don't feel heard or represented or understood by local government. And the real issue with that is we could be on the brink of economic collapse for our generation. And who's really going to be able to actually say that, but also relate and understand that. And I felt so convicted almost in a way or called out of it's really fun to campaign and use these, big ideas and talk about this great, big, bright, positive future. And of course, we still mean all of that, right? Of course, retaining and attracting county staff. Of course, housing. Of course, climate. You and I have talked a lot about also public safety. So of course, there's these things that are very, very important. But I was able to, I think, dig a little deeper that day when I was with that individual of maybe some of the priorities are not necessarily the topics in and of themselves, but the fact that the people who care about these topics don't feel heard. And maybe my role is I need to get my foot in the door so that I can actually open the door and everyone can come in behind me and we can work on these things together. And maybe my role is how do we get as many people to the table as possible so that every area of our community is feeling represented, is feeling heard, and feels like they have agency in affecting what they want to see happen with local government. And the outcomes, right, might still be that we get to do really exciting policy work on housing or on climate or on public safety, right? The outcome might still be that those issues still do move forward. But as far as my priorities, if I get elected, I want to make everyone feel like they're a part of that.
Okay. So being having a more inclusive government is definitely what I'm hearing. More inclusive and now, by the way, I totally understand you using three top priorities. Every campaign does it. I did too. And it's important. One, it just kind of gives the tone for your campaign. But
Mhm.
yeah, no, definitely campaigns do shift over time as you talk to voters. If you're smart, if you're not, you're just going to stick to your guns and lose on them. I mean, if you want to die on the hill, die on the hill. But
Yeah,
there
yeah.
are, if you're smart, you're listening to voters, and then things can adjust um, to fix it. And the best people and the best campaigns do listen to voters. and adjust accordingly. As long as it still is in line with your values, it's not a contradiction at all. So thank you for that was a really good answer. I really appreciate it because that really kind of gave us insight into what it is that you're doing, how it is that you formulate um, what your policies are probably going to be. It's going to be based on bringing people in, and it's going to be an inclusive. Basically, it tells me that you're not going to make these decisions in a vacuum. You don't already know
Right.
everything. You're going to be talking to voters and getting information before you make your decisions, which is good for anyone running for office. Um, Now, this is a similar question, but it focuses on the negative, so I apologize. What are the biggest problems right now, in your opinion, that are facing Island County?
I mean, like I just said, there's I think this undertone or this undercurrent where so many people do not feel they have access or representation within local government. Um, so much of this campaign, while it certainly has been about like let's get Marie elected, the things I end up actually doing at events or in my one-on-one with many voters is people who are coming in there saying, "I don't even know what a commissioner does." And
Mhm.
and I'm thinking, that's great. Like we can talk about what a commissioner does and we can talk about local policy and we can talk about the departments they oversee. We can talk about those technical definitions. But what's too bad is that clearly the knowledge was not already out there in mass that people who live here feel like they understand because we're not meeting with people who know nothing, right? We're meeting with directors of organizations. We're meeting with people who've lived here their whole lives. We're having events where hundreds of people are coming. And there's this overall feeling of we don't necessarily even understand what county government is. I got that actually just this week when I knocked on a door in Oak Harbor. And I was like, I'm running for office and ballots are coming soon. And I want to talk to you about what issues you care about. And this man very sincerely looked at me and he said, I have no idea what the county even does, so I do not know the issues. And which is good, right? Because then it sort of turns into a fruitful discussion around like, well, are you familiar with public works or maybe the planning department? Maybe you've heard of public, right? We're able to have good discussions. But then I am doing so much civics 101 with people. And so I think there's this hurdle right now of many people inside the system don't know how the system works.
Right.
And that can be a challenge as far as how do we get work done in an effective way. And a lot of it is around that outreach and education component, which ties into what we just talked about as far as people I think are very hungry to feel included and involved.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. There's a lot of people who don't even know what their local government does, and it's not because they are dumb. They're not. They're very smart
Yeah.
people. Some of these people are very successful people. The problem is local government, particularly here, but it's also everywhere, isn't very good at explaining what they do. Part of the reason I started this podcast was to talk a little bit about what they do,
Yeah.
and to explain commissioners. Like a lot of people have been asking me lately, wait a minute, how come I didn't see Melanie Bacon or Marie Shimada on my ballot? I live in Island
Yeah.
County. And so I was like, well, okay, we have an interesting system here. Um, we have a primary first, and only District 1 gets to vote on the District 1 candidates. After the primary, when we have our two, the entire island gets to vote on the two. And that can be confusing. Like, oh, okay, so they weren't on my primary ballot, but they're going to be on my general ballot. Got it. Okay. And I think that's the only office that's that way locally. Everywhere else is just voted entirely by the island.
Right.
Um, and I think it was built that way to try and ensure that we did not ever have all three commissioners disappear at once and have somebody start from scratch.
Mhm.
Um, which is why we have two commissioners running instead of three. The third one runs 2 years from now. So yeah, no, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in Island County about how it works with government, how it works with voting that a lot of people don't know. So there is a huge education component to it. So thank you again for being on the podcast so we can talk about it.
Yeah, I'm glad you said all of that because almost 100% of my doorbelling on Camino Island has been met with, like, "Why are you here? We don't vote in your district." And having to explain, for the general November 5th election, the entire county's voting, and it's not actually just my district, it's the District 2 election as well. So, kind of making it really fun for people. guess what? You get to actually vote in 2 additional elections you didn't know about until I showed up today. And that I call my campaign manager frequently and we kind of joke about like, okay, someone else should have done an entire media campaign around who's voting. That way we can show up
And
on the
when,
doors and
yeah,
talk about who we are.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
it throws people off, right?
yeah,
People are used to seeing people on their ballot twice, and for the commissioner races, you do not, unless you live in their district.
right.
Um, so, um, I'm going to ask you a question, and this one is usually tough, but what separates you from your opponents? Right now, you're running against an incumbent, Melanie Bacon, of the same party, and then there's a write-in campaign for Damian Green. Um, what separates you from those two?
Um, First of all, I I really believe that every woman in politics is a trailblazer, and I think we have to acknowledge and respect and thank Melanie for being a trailblazer. Um, and then also acknowledge I'm now on that trail. And I appreciate, everyone who's come before me to create the opportunity for me to be here. I also have been pretty adamant since I started that we don't ever really talk outright about my opponent. And that's hard for a lot of people. I had a woman show up to one of my kind of smaller campaign events. She pushed really hard. She said, I want you to tell me explicitly what Melanie's doing wrong. And I said, I'm actually not going to answer that because this isn't about Melanie doing anything wrong. This is about me doing something for my community. And she went home and she put my opponent's yard sign up. And that's fine. We're still not going to be the team that does any mudslinging. And if people don't like that, like they can go elsewhere. We're going to keep being the team that's thinking about how do we represent the whole community. And I do think that alone sort of is a difference. I guess an example of something that has been on my mind recently is that there's a local organization that does workshops and lectures and kind of public education opportunities. And they approached me and they said, we want to do something with you, not a political event because of your campaign, but what we noticed by watching your campaign is that you're a community builder. And our organization wants to move in that direction of being community builders. And so we want you to come in and do a lecture on what that really means and what is community building. And I think that was a huge honor to be asked, and I'm really excited to work on some curriculum materials for what that is going to look like for that event, um, in my personal capacity. But I do have to stop and reflect on why is it that it's my campaign and not an incumbent's campaign that's being noticed for doing things like bringing people together.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, and one thing that I always harp on is I hope that our local campaigns stay clean. I do not want Island County to ever take a page from the federal government on how those races are run. It's just evil, the things that they do to each other. And we definitely don't need to do that here. I'm very proud that my race against Tony Lamb, we were very respectful of each other. I still think he's a good man.
Yeah.
We just had different visions. He was focused on the experience, and I was focused on a little bit more outreach to inform people and be you know uh, more. Nobody knows what the treasurer does, so a little bit more
Oh,
engaging with the
yeah.
community. And so I pushed that. Well, ultimately he won, but neither one of us put an attack out against each other, and that usually doesn't happen in Island County. I hope that stays the same, because we do have to live with each other when this election's over. So we're in the same community. Um, so what? You've kind of already answered this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Camano Island. I've spoken about how Camano Island is, and I'm an advocate for Camano because I live here. They feel a little bit less included than Woodby Island, when it comes to local government. And for us, it's particularly important this election because you are really the only government we have, because we do not have a city council. And when I say you, I mean the commissioners, the race you're running for.
Yeah.
Um, we don't have a city council. We don't have a mayor. So Island County government is all the government we have. So
Mhm.
can you confirm that if elected, that Camino Island residents will have reasonable access to you as their elected official?
Yes, and I'm gonna make this more than just a yes or no question and talk about Camino a little bit because I do really love it, and
Let's
I mean, I'll
go.
point out, right? I care about Camino a lot too, and you'll see, right? You'll see it's always on my mind. It's literally in the background, and I'm even in the fall spirit today with my Camino shop T-shirt on, and hopefully, if Melissa ever sees this, it makes her smile because it's my favorite store of all time. Uh, before I even decided I was going to run
Well,
for
by
office.
the way.
Yeah. I I've been involving Camino, or I've been trying to be involved with Camino, I guess, however we wanna look at that. When I co-founded the Agricultural Resources Committee for Island County, there were a lot of discussions in the very beginning with the small group of us who co-launched around, "Is this gonna be a committee for Whidbey, or is this a committee for the county?" And the ultimate tension that caused the committee to form was a county related issue. So we decided we should probably be a committee that is representing the entirety of the county, so that way we know we have the most accurate and representative voice when we're going to the county to maybe advocate for things or work through issues that are going to affect the agricultural sector. And we were so intentional about doing some outreach, and we were really blessed and fortunate that Mona Campbell, who's with Christofferson Farm, agreed to join the Agricultural Resources Committee for Island County, and our ability to say, like, we're trying to represent the whole county, including Camino, and that's why we're using voices from Camino to help move through some of the policy work that we care about. I have been involved in the past with the tourism board, which is known as Embrace Whidbey and Camino Islands. And that's actually how I first met Jessica from the Camino Chamber of Commerce. And ultimately, I think that's actually how you and I even met each other, is
Yep.
because of my relationship with Jessica and knowing about the event at Arrowhead Ranch, and coming out and trying to meet with people who also care about Camino Island. Um, and there was, a lot of connection that's been made through the chamber opportunities. So my experience and love and commitment to Camino goes before I even knew I was going to run for office, and is a future looking concept as well. I don't think it's a secret that it's my hope that Janet is able to win her race that she's in right now, and that means, that there's some big changes that might come in the future. And what I talk to people about on Camino is everyone seems to have this really protective sense of, we knew Janet understood us and cared about us. And that mattered a lot when she first decided that she was going to run for county commissioner in District 3. And talking to people around, I want to continue that for you. Like, I can still help continue Janet's legacy of making sure that Camino very much feels like it's a part of county government, that it feels represented, that its unique needs are also being identified and worked on, that people feel like they're able to feel represented or feel like they're involved and included. So the same principles I think that we carry throughout the campaign with everyone around, we want a more inclusive government. It includes all of Camino as well. And I do feel strongly about that. And I hear it echoed every time I am on Camino.
Well, thank you. That was a great answer. Other people running for office use that because Camino definitely needs more attention. We have I think only two local elected officials from Camino, and that's Janet St. Clair, which you mentioned, and then Kelly Mauk, the assessor, and that's it. So it's always important for the Camino voters to know that they're going to be part of the team because you are the only government we have. So thank you so much for answering that question and doing a really good job with a yes or no question. so, um, one of the things that always comes up with every elected office, particularly when it has to deal with any kind of legislative or executive ability, is, and to further clarify that, the commissioners serve as like a city council would and a mayor. So
Mhm.
they're both a legislative and executive body for Island County. Public safety comes up.
Mm.
And I'm wondering what some of the solutions you might have, particularly dealing with, retaining police, dealing with the homelessness crisis. Fentanyl is a problem everywhere, including here. right in our backyard. So, what are some solutions that you want to bring to the table for that?
Yeah, I don't even know where to start because I could go on about this all day and different thoughts that I have about this, but,
Do it.
all of it all of my answer, I think, hinges on collaboration, and bringing law enforcement in and talking about what that looks like, and agencies or industries external to law enforcement and bringing them in and talking about what does a holistic view look like when it comes to addressing some of these community issues. And I he might tell this story differently, so I'm not going to speak for him, but as a South Whitby kid, I'm in downtown Langley a lot, and I ran into the police chief in Langley recently, and kind of brought up this idea of there was another question that had been asked in another forum that I actually wanted to follow up with him about, and I wanted his opinion. We sort of started talking about there's this very, I think, this box of definition for what law enforcement is. And then there's, I think, what happens in reality, because so often they might be very involved in the community and know people, or they might be frequently the first to respond to situations that maybe are or are not actual law enforcement situations, but they're still the ones that are maybe frequently having to go to the same places and see these same things. And is there an effort for, if it's not really falling inside the technical law enforcement definition, maybe it goes over into the social services definition, or maybe it just sort of goes into the like the community cares about this and they frequently see it, but who else is also trying to work on that definition. um, is there any actual programmatic effort around kind of that pipeline of making sure that people are being cared for in the community in a kind of holistic or symbiotic way? And we ended up having a good conversation right there just on the street of no, but that's the desire to work towards, as far as there are things obviously that law enforcement either see or know, but it maybe doesn't fit their exact job description of what they are required to be doing according to like to statutory law. Maybe they're not supposed to be doing that. But are there other organizations where they could, or kind of issues around if someone ultimately crosses over into what they really need is medical care, but there's no real pipeline right now to have a feedback loop between law enforcement and medical care. And of course, we're not advocating to break HIPAA. That's not what's going on. But just the overall idea that like everyone is actually addressing these problems together and doesn't necessarily currently have the ability to have feedback or communication with each other around where did that person ultimately end up? Are they still being cared for, and are they going to return? And what are the things that would support them when they return back into the community or re-enter into the community, from whether that was a law enforcement as a terminal solution, or whether there was medical care as a terminal solution, or whether there was some other type of social service. And now they're kind of coming back and reintegrating into our communities. And I think all of it is kind of around not everyone who maybe is addressing a situation, like let's say homelessness, for example. Not
Mhm.
everyone who addresses it always gets together to talk about what is your role in this? What is my role in this? And how are the two actually working together so that there aren't gaps in how the people who need the services are being addressed? Um, I definitely support, I understand, and certainly sympathize with the fact that we are understaffed, and I have heard the presentations from the Island County Sheriff about staffing and this, how Washington State in general is fairly low compared to the rest of the nation, and then Island County is fairly low, and the heartache around it's really hard. It's a really hard industry to recruit in general right now.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, being in Island County and having some really complex conversations around what can we compensate people with? Is that competitive? And even if we can pay them, do they have a place to live? So all these systems fit together, and it affects things like the availability of personnel in the law enforcement industry of, can we pay competitive wages, and do people even have a place to live, that this becomes a place where they would want to be in law enforcement. You and I think, have had some specific discussions around that personnel issue greatly affects Camano Island, because if there's only, between one or two officers on at a time, and they have to maybe take somebody to the county seat, that's a 4-hour window where there's maybe a gap in that type of service
Yeah.
of law enforcement. And so, how are we going to be able to address this so that everyone can work together on these things? The other thing I learned about it when I was on Camino at that event where you and I met, though, was the community's involvement with law enforcement and the foundation that has worked really hard to do things like they self-funded, I think, some of the um, speed speed trailers.
Oh,
Those little
yeah.
trailers.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And
I know what
how
you're talking about.
yeah, right, and how there's, like, these concepts where I think the community feels really involved in things, and I was like, "This could be a really interesting idea to take back and see if that works in other places too," of what level of community involvement could also coincide with supporting law enforcement, so that then law enforcement can focus on some of those areas where they need to, like, recruiting, more officers.
Yeah. So, and I think you hit a good point. We don't just have a problem with recruiting officers. Our biggest problem is retaining them. And two of the reasons that we have a problem, so we spend all this money getting them trained, sending them to the academy, getting them ready, and then somebody else picks them up.
Mhm,
So we have trouble with retention, and there are some reasons for that. One of the big reasons is I don't know if our pay is competitive. And the other reason is even if it is competitive, living here is expensive. It's tough. So to ask a police officer to take not competitive pay and live in a place where you must absolutely get competitive pay in order to live, it's difficult. So it's real easy for a place like Marysville or in some cases even Idaho to take our cops that we
mhm.
spend all the money training. So one solution that I've heard, and you don't have to answer whether or not you do it, but I just like your opinion on it on its face is that before we hire police officers, we have some kind of contract where they'll stay with us for a certain amount of time, so that way we can at least get some return on our investment. We may already have something like that in place. I don't know, but we seem to have a huge retention issue and trying to figure out how to solve it.
Yeah, yeah. I have no idea if we have something like that in place. That feels like kind of an employment contract conversation to be had with human resources. I think more importantly than trying to get someone to sign that they're gonna stay somewhere, like, does any of that matter if they still don't have housing? Like, does any
Good
of that
point.
matter if they can't afford an apartment, or if the apartment they can't afford is not even in Island County? Is it sustainable for them to commute here to be law enforcement? I guess those are kind of the issues for me around, are they gonna have to leave anyways because of either cost of living or, it's not a sustainable endeavor.
Yeah. Nope. Those are all very good things that require smart people to sit down and figure it out. But we got to figure something out because you're right. For what I've been
Mhm,
told, we have situations where our police officers on Camino probably should make an arrest. But if it's one of those misdemeanors, I mean, sometimes they make arrests not to ruin your life. Sometimes they make arrests to prevent you from doing something that will ruin your life. Particularly in domestic disputes, I've seen. My uncle is a police commissioner himself in Illinois. He's made arrests where there was no prosecution to follow, and that was to get them out of a situation, particularly with domestic
mhm,
disputes
mhm.
that might have gotten out of hand. Well, for one of
Yeah,
our officers to do that, you've got to take someone all the way to Coopville, and that's a 2-hour drive if you're lucky. And then you have to book them. That itself probably takes an hour to 2 hours, and then you got to drive back. So for
yeah,
6 hours, we're shorthanded,
yeah,
and that could lead to a disaster. Now we have Stanwood close by, but we need to be pretty self sufficient, and they've got their own city to protect, right? So
yeah,
if there's an emergency in Stanwood and an emergency in Camino, Stanwood's got to focus on Stanwood. So
yeah.
those are some of the concerns that are coming up with our police issues. And thank you so much for talking about it and answering it. I think that's something that we definitely need to consider, and our commissioners are going to need to tackle. One of the other issues that's coming up is I think we're going to be building a jail soon. We need to figure out how to do that. Um, they are not cheap. So a lot of stuff going on there. So this is more of a holistic question, and I find these are easier to answer. What is your vision for how Island County government should work?
Um, I feel like this question's ripe for sort of a very big utopian answer,
I thought
and
I'd give you one.
right, yeah, I'm like, so there's this, of course, there's this beautiful, scenery in my head around, residents or professionals, they fully understand, comprehend, and can anticipate the permit process, and they feel good about it. Staff fully can understand and comprehend and anticipate the permit process, so they feel good about serving the public. Everyone sort of knows their role and has been highly trained and highly skilled and able to sort of get projects done or understand how this is going to impact a community. Of course, in the ideal future, there's funding for everything that needs funding. Everyone's paid in a competitive way. Everyone can put food on the table for their families. Um, it's right. I think that really big, beautiful thing, which one of my friends described as functionability. She's like, I just want to know that there's functionability in our local government. Um, and it was those sorts of things of I want to know that the staff there are paid and they stay and they know their jobs so that when the rest of us go in and we need something, like we're able to be met in the moment and know what we're getting. Um, and not, I think, a lot of what's going on right now in people's lived experiences of I did this project 3 years ago. I went back in now because I want to do it again. There's a whole new staff. We had to start from scratch. It was going to take another 2 years to get my permit approved. So I went ahead and just pulled it. And I just literally had that conversation with a family member last week about a housing project that would have
Yeah.
added some more availability and more units, and they pulled it and walked away entirely. And they described it as there's not much room to foster creativity in getting to a solution that could have created like this best outcome. Um,
So you just
so
hit something very important, and I just wanted to follow up on that. So
yeah.
we do have a problem with getting housing here, and a lot of that has to do with permitting and issues that create hardships. And one of those issues, I think it's somewhat government created. They make it more difficult to build housing instead of less difficult. They also make it more expensive. So that's something that to keep an eye on. Are you going to be able to try and, in your vision, does government sometimes, when it needs to, get out of the way?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so, and I would agree, and I've been tracking that issue for a while. Last year, I went to the builders forum when the builders met with the commissioners, and there wasn't anybody in that room that was like, "I want it my way and I want it now." There was no one in the room who said that. All of the feedback in that room really did hinge on right now there's zero predictability, and that impacts our industry because when we go back to maybe either the homeowner or the subcontractors, and we don't have the ability to convey an accurate timeline or a timeline that's changing or different needs around that and what that is going to change, that's a thousands and thousands of dollars conversation that's being had.
Mhm.
And there are people where, either they're going to get really, really cranky because they've invested a ton of money and it's taking a really long time, or they're going to pull out and leave Island County entirely.
Yeah.
And for on the homeowner side and on the contractor side of things. So, yeah, very much so. I think working towards a system in which it's knowable. Like that is what I heard everyone saying is they're like, we want to be able to anticipate what it is. If something's going to be 10 weeks, we just simply want to anticipate the 10 weeks. If it's going to be 4 weeks, we want to know that that was the thing we should anticipate. But it's more around like knowing what the process is going to be so that they can, right? They have to go and do a lot of stuff with their clients after that. And it all sort of hinges on, do we know this process? Can we anticipate this process and build our entire sector around this? Because that's how this is going to move forward. So I hear what you're saying. And yes, I agree.
Yeah. Well, perfect. And let's see here. This is my last question.
Oh, wait, no, I wasn't finished answering the last question.
Oh,
That's
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I just remember that. That was like kind of I think that big utopia vision around like as my friend called it functionability. I
Right.
think at a more immediate and pragmatic level, like I think I will feel success if there are more people who feel like they can say things like, I went to a meeting and I was heard and I was directed on where to go to try to figure out either how to solve my own problem or to meet with other people who have similar problems so we could get together and talk about solutions and goal setting. And I think a lot of people know my mentor in a lot of this has been Helen Price Johnson. And there's that joke sometimes among people who remember when she was the commissioner where, wherever two are gathered in her name, there is Helen. And I think bringing back that idea around accessibility and inclusion of people just feeling like it wasn't about whether she agreed with them or was going to do what they were maybe showing up to say. It was more the back and forth of this is a relationship between elected officials, between government and community members, and having that relationship and everyone feeling like they're back in that type of a setting.
All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, no, that's and you even mentioned I just saw one of your ads in the Cracker, and one thing that stuck out to me is your campaign is based off solution based results. I think that's close to what it said. Let me pull it
Yeah.
up. But yeah, no, it's solutions based. You don't
Mhm.
just want to give these, pie in the sky ideas. You want to actually bring solutions to the current problems that we have. So that's good. I think that's what we need. We definitely need solutions because we've got some issues. So, what is the greatest strength you think that you're going to bring to local government?
Yeah, I hope you're ready for this one. Um, I'm gonna draw an image. I think there's there's a lot of stuff I wanna see that I talked about around, inclusion or making everyone feel like they're valued and involved and getting to have agency. I think a lot of that, what it comes down to is rhizomatic thinking. And so I think right now there's a lot of systems that exist in like, here's the quote leader
There you go.
and
Okay.
and that like this is the organization and leadership goes in this direction. I think that's what's going on in a lot of different areas, but particularly I think with county government right now. And I think the thing that I am trying to campaign for and show up with is that like maybe here is the county and there's leadership existing in all different places within, and that's all connected. But there's also, right, community members, community organizations, leadership existing in other places. And maybe there's really strong connections here and really strong connections here, which means that now we get to have connections here because all these things are connected and seeing how that all works together and seeing partnerships and alliances and the ability to collaborate to address the entire community that we're inside of.
Okay. So, not necessarily from the top down leadership, but a collaborative leadership where you're working with people within the community to accomplish goals.
Yes, that's it, 100%.
Sweet. I got it in just a couple of words, which makes me cool. So, well, thank you so much. So, what I always do at the end of the podcast is give you an opportunity to make your pitch for your campaign. I know you've got an event coming up October 11th, and just a real quick pitch of why you're the choice, how people can reach you if they want to get a hold of your campaign to support it, and some events you might have coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited that on October 11th, we will be having an event on Camino Island, and it's being co-hosted by John Amell, Mary Cantor, and Mary Margaret Haugen. And that will be at the multipurpose building on Camino. I also have upcoming events on Whidbey Island as well. So if people are interested, they're welcome to email our team info@marieshimada.com. There's events on Whidbey Island taking place on October 12th and October 14th. Um, and and so, yeah, we will also be participating in upcoming forums. There is the AAUW Stanwood Camino Forum happening on October 9th. And then on October 17th, there's actually two forums. There is a lunchtime Oak Harbor Chamber Forum. And then on the evening of the 17th, there is the always beloved and highly anticipated League of Women Voters, which is an online forum that everyone will be able to access. And those are always really, really high quality forums. So plenty of opportunities for people to either come and meet me, or if they want to learn more about every candidate in the local races, there's those forums will have all of us involved. As far as I think the the why me of it all and the why now. Um, there's been a lot of conversation around the comprehensive plan update that's going on right now and how important that is. And I agree that it's important, but I'm not running for office so that I can finish a plan during 2025. I'm running because that plan covers the next 20 years of my life and of our lives, and it will be the single most important 20 years of my life. I've been really, really open about the family experiences that Cody and I are going through right now. We hope to have kids and raise them here. They will become sixth generation Whidbey Island residents, and they will become seventh generation Island County residents. And what that future looks like, knowing that they have access to beaches, knowing that they have quality school systems, knowing that they have places to go and do outdoor recreation, knowing that they're surrounded by a community that's experiencing, economic thriving. All of those things are in my vision. And it's not about finishing a plan, it's about implementing a plan to actually get work done for our community and for our county. You're muted.
I muted myself. No, I think I just figured out part of the reason why you've been so successful as far as fundraising. You listed off a number of events happening in very close succession. So that is pretty impressive. So it sounds like you've got a pretty good campaign staff and a good team. So yeah, thank you for letting us know everywhere to go. If we wanted to go to your website to learn more about you, what is your website?
Yeah, really easy. It's marieshimada.com.
Oh, that is easy.
Yes, yep, full name.com. Yeah.
All righty. Well, perfect. Well, thank you so much. It's been great talking to you, and I hope we can get you back on again closer to Election Day.
Okay, thank you so much for your time today, Richard. As always, it was a good conversation with you.
All righty. Well, thank you so much.